Hi, I'm Chantal Amador, the founder of the EA Project, an events production company focused on climate change. And the Circular Society Network is the community of the EA Project. It's a community of leaders and experts all over the world. We're 215 today, and all of them are working in the most influential industries: construction, property, energy, fashion, food and agriculture, transport and mobility, retail, supply chain, finance and investment, and more. From SMEs to big groups or innovative startups and non-profits. It's a very, very diverse group, which I'm very proud of. And this is why I want to highlight the people behind this network I've been building for a year now. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for being with me today. For people who don't know you, so Angela Rawstorne is a business advisor for Togetherband's Clean Power campaign and a member of the Circular Society Network since January this year. So you first joined virtually and then we finally got to meet in person recently. So yeah, thanks for taking a few minutes to answer 5 questions. And first question is going to be very simple. It's just me giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself better than I just did, more in depth. Tell me a little bit more about your professional background and about your mission today for Togetherband's Clean Power campaign.
So, Chantal, thank you so much for having me on this interview, this sort of podcast today. Yeah, my name is Angela. I am, I guess, a sustainability freelance consultant is probably how I describe myself. And I'm working across multiple sectors. So from fashion and beauty right through to food, energy, as you just mentioned, the Clean Power campaign, and working not exclusively, but with brands like Togetherband to really land campaigns that are around sustainability initiatives. And I'm working on in a number of different sort of ways. So some of it's marketing and communications, finding commercial partners to support campaigns so we can get them off the ground, helping brands to integrate sustainability values across their business. So that sort of kind of individuals and sort of employees can start to connect with that sustainability mission, as well as helping brands to become B Corp. So quite a lot of stuff going on. We are facing the biggest challenge I think that we've ever faced in terms of our human survival, because I think we all agree that the planet will continue. It's just humanity on it won't. And therefore, it's, I think, down to all of us as individuals, as businesses, as communities, to kind of understand what we can do in order to play our part in sort of, bringing about change. So that's kind of me right now. I have had actually a really rewarding career in media for the last 20 years. That sounds like a big number, which I don't always like saying, but it has been a really rich kind of period of my life. And there's a lot of those skills that I acquired in that sort of that media career that have really kind of helped and supported my new career in sustainability. But I've worked with a lot of leading global publishers on some of the world's most recognizable brands, from Marie Claire and InStyle to Cosmo, the independent newspaper. And so there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that comes with those brands and with the businesses that we worked with. So again, across every sector. So I think my experience is quite broad, but that's been really useful in sort of developing, I guess, my new role in sort of a sustainability space. And then from an ESG perspective, so working with Marie Claire for the last 8 years was an incredible experience. And that's probably where I sort of really understood kind of how important purpose is to my life and to the brand that I work on. And the last 18 months was, because Marie Claire's always kind of operated in that sort of intersectional space of kind of climate and sort of, gender equality. But in the last last 18 months, we really brought sustainability kind of to the fore. And again, it was I think, a real turning point in kind of my own personal and professional life. And then latterly, as you mentioned, I'm working with the Bottle Top Foundation and Togetherband to launch their Clean Power campaign. And that was to help them bring on board sort of more investment to kind of really sort of make this campaign have momentum. And the campaign itself is it's on Oxford Street right now, and it's an array of beautiful, dramatic, graphic, colourful flags created by an artist called Morag Myerskov. And the whole idea is that you use art as a catalyst to really drive change. So the idea is that, anyone who's on Oxford Street as a consumer will look up, see those flags and be curious about the campaign and start to seek out the kind of the messaging around the campaign. If you're a business in that area, then it's about sort of how do we as a business district, given the impact that cities have on our kind of carbon footprint, our nation's carbon footprint, how can they start to look to reduce that footprint through their energy choices? So it's a really hugely rewarding campaign. And then sort of personally, I've spent the last 2 years on a bit of a deep learning mission. So I left Marie Claire, realized that I needed a bit of credibility behind me other than sort of, that brand experience. So did the Cambridge University CISL course, Business Sustainability Management, which was just hugely empowering and understanding kind of what the problems are and the levers for change are. And then some other accreditations, just so that I can talk to businesses credibly, not just about my past experience, but sort of almost my ongoing learning.
What would you think is the biggest challenge you've faced yourself as an individual in your transition, maybe, or I can't say organization because you're a freelancer.
But my sector.
Yeah, what was your biggest challenge on your side, and what do you think is the biggest challenge for the organizations you work with during that transition?
If I start with kind of a sort of sector, so I think from a fashion perspective, because I guess with a background in kind of women's media publishing, sort of fashion was a key pillar. So it's an area I'm really familiar with, and I think the fashion sector's lack of regulation and the expectation that it would regulate itself just hasn't worked, and I think that's really evident. We've all seen this sort of horrific pictures of landfill full of clothes sort of emitting methane, which is so toxic, more so than carbon. And we just need to the sector needs to understand what it can do to make the changes. And I think the sector is just too big and too out of control. That's why legislation is so key. And it's kind of proven time and time again throughout history that it is legislation that drives change. And until kind of, I guess, governments and policy get on top of that, then fashion is just going to continue to be one of the biggest polluters on the earth. So I think what I sort of find really interesting and disturbing in equal measure is that there were only 19 UK fashion policies that were published in the last 5 years in the UK versus almost 700 for obesity. And despite the fact that the fashion industry is the second largest user and polluter of water globally, and it's one of the biggest contributors rather to modern slavery. And so therefore, why is this government so disinclined to legislate? And I don't have a reason for that, but there are some kind of glimmers of hope out there. So there's the New York Fashion Act. Now, despite the fact that it didn't advance out of the committee session, it is set to be a bit of a landmark legislation which will hold fashion companies accountable for their kind of global human rights abuses and their environmental impact. And given the scale and the size of New York State and the businesses operating out of there, and that's global businesses, it will have a huge impact. In fact, there was one of the leading journals had sort of almost taken a view that if the act had passed and if they looked at Nike and the sort of the negative impact Nike's having both socially and environmentally, then they'd be subject to a $1 billion fine every year. So, there
Wow.
is, and that's how I guess you sort of get the industry to progress. You kind of hit them where it hurts, which is kind of in their pockets. So,
Yeah, when you put number in front of their impact, it really speaks loud.
it certainly does. It
Wow.
certainly does. So I think that yeah, I think regulation, is the biggest challenge. And I think until that starts to happen, then yeah, I don't see that there's any hope for fashion saving itself, frankly. So yeah, so let's hope that that progresses quickly. And then you mentioned sort of from me personally, kind of the area that's kind of having the most progress. And I think for me, it's sort of campaigns like Clean Power. And although Clean Power is about energy, it is connected to fashion, because Clean Power is about cities transforming their kind of footprint. And bearing in mind cities and central cities, the West End where the flags are is a retail district. And if you think about retail and sort of, the dominance of fashion in that retail sort of space. So I think what Clean Power is looking to do is, and actually through the organization that sort of sponsors the flags, which is the New West End Company. And I guess the reason I'm mentioning them is because they are they're called a business investment district. So they look after the West End and the West End businesses. And it's almost their job to kind of get those businesses to understand how they can transition so that they're kind of ready for 2030. And they see that, if they can really sort of spearhead on the West End, that they can sort of influence, the rest of London, they can influence UK and also globally. But the idea is that working with the Big Clean Switch, they'll take those 3,000 businesses in the West End that haven't already made the switch to clean energy, and help them understand what their footprint is and how they then transition. And of course, if you think about that, 3,000 businesses moving from, sort of fossil fuel to clean energy, that's a huge transformation and a huge impact. So, where campaigns like Clean Power, can really make their mark. And I just think we need to see more of them.
And yeah, I'm very happy to see organizations like that really take the lead, because I agree with you with the fact that legislation drives change, a bit like an incentive.
Yes.
But I also believe that it's not the only way. Like if we use art and culture to actually make people keen on transitioning instead of forcing them to transition through
Yeah.
legislation, if it really comes from themselves because it's a cool thing to do, like
Yeah.
all these cool retailers, all these cool fashion brands are doing great stuff, not all of them, but when the fashion industry, for example, they have a strong cultural influence, and when one brand does something in that space in terms of sustainability, it can really drive change too.
Absolutely. Well, if anyone can make sustainability trendy and fashionable, then surely it's the fashion industry.
Definitely.
Hope. You'd really hope, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. There's still a lot to be done, but
There's
yeah,
still a lot to be
the
done.
arts, entertainment, media, and fashion together, I think they can drive change in a
And
powerful way.
sustainability, yeah, and sustainability um, drivers, the sort of collaboration is absolutely key, isn't it? I mean, I think my mind has been blown as to how many people have looked to help me on my journey. Sort of people go out of their way, people I've never met before, to kind of make a meeting or make a call, in order to understand where I'm coming from and how they can, assist on that journey. And I think kind of the recognition that industries and businesses, they need to collaborate sort of, within their sector, outside their sector, to bring about change. And I think there are some sort of big things happening out there. I just think we need more of them and more momentum behind them.
So yeah, that's a good transition to my next question. I wasn't going to ask you it straight away, but I think it would be a good one. A good moment to ask you what do you think about circular collaborations, cross-sector collaborations, and is it something that you are encouraging with the businesses you work with? Because I know in your case it may be on a contract basis, you have one profile you're working with in one sector.
Yeah.
But for example, the fashion industry, speaking from the Circular Society Network perspective, I like putting them in the same room with farmers, for example, people in the
Yeah.
agriculture sector, because in terms of the connections with raw materials, and I think there's something interesting there to explore and start exploring to create new systems. Is that something you see or not yet? And what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think this sort of regenerative agriculture is a really, really interesting space. And that connection between agriculture and fashion, I think, is really, really interesting, isn't it? And I think there's some brands, the likes of Allbirds, who are doing, and many others, which I don't have off the top of my head, which are doing some really interesting kind of work in that space. And I know you've even got brands like, is it General Mills? Big food company who are kind of working with the fashion industry around regenerative agriculture. So it is big news. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I think from my kind of circular experience and journey, I think re-commerce is probably where I'm most excited. And I think, again, it comes from my background, sort of within the fashion sector from a publishing perspective. It's a huge growth trend and it's set to continue. In fact, it's kind of set to be, is it 1.5 times bigger than fast fashion by 2028? So, that's hugely encouraging. And I guess the sector is attracting kind of a younger consumer. And let's face it, if you're a young consumer, they are fast fashion consumers. So if we can convert them, then we stand a chance of really kind of quelling that sort of fast fashion sort of scale. But you've got things like, when Etsy acquired Depop, was it kind of about 18 months ago, that was kind of, 30 million consumers across 150 countries, who are sort of, those Gen Zs. You've got Caring in their stake in Vestia.com, and then, Gucci's Real. So I think there is this real, brands have really cottoned onto the fact that, there is power in sort of, almost taking back their own inventory, certainly from a luxury perspective, and sort of, owning that and sort of, and it's a really powerful message around sustainability and circularity to their consumers. And then for me, I think the eBay and Love Island partnership is really interesting. I think there's so much power in this collaboration, and I don't think it's necessarily been realized yet. But this is not just a one hit. I think this has kind of longevity around it. And Love Island, I'm not necessarily a fan, although my niece was a contestant a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I sort of, understand almost, having seen her as an individual and the power that she has on her platforms, actually sort of, once the show has aired, it's actually what those influencers go on to do post show is really powerful. And if you take, so eBay have signed, what's her name? Is it Natasha? So she is now their ambassador for the next year, sort of their circular ambassador. And I guess what's compelling about her is that she's obviously a very beautiful young woman. She, not only is she sort of this gorgeous creature, she has her superpower. So she's got the kind of cochlear implant. So suddenly she's kind of this really kind of quite special individual as well. She has, I think, about 1.7 million as a combined scale on her social platforms, which will only grow. And that's where your Gen Z are. So she's creating this army of potential Gen Z fashion activists through that collaboration. So I really hope that I think they're being very smart about it. I think they're not trying to be too worthy about it, although I think they could probably eke a little bit more out of it in that respect. But yeah, this is just about bringing about change. And if you think about how Love Island essentially fueled fast fashion, then this has the power to be really, really incredible. So yeah, so it kind of filled me with joy when I heard about that partnership and then seeing how it's unfolded. And I think there's some really big stats coming from eBay around it. So I think there's sort of 700% increase in search on their platform. I think there are
Wow.
plus 1,000% listings since the on eBay since the Love Island partnership went live. I think Google are reporting kind of huge trend increase in sort of terms around resale, literally attributed to the show. So that's
Great
incredibly
news.
powerful, and that tells you that it's working. Then from a personal perspective, working on Marie Claire, we had a product which was called the Marie Claire Edit platform, and it's basically where you could shop for items from any of the major retailers, so from a Farfetch right through to an ASOS, and everything in between. And you could shop that from the Marie Claire platform. So we aggregated those brands, we wrapped them in a Marie Claire sort of shop front effectively, but we were the driving force behind those consumers going to those brands on our platform. And so what we decided to do was, could we flip that? So rather than it just being about sort of new brands, but could you shop the brands you love, the pre-loved brands you love from the Marie Claire platform? So we launched the Edit Resale project, and we were in partnership with Vanish at the time, and Vanish have an amazing campaign which is around love your clothes for longer, take more care of your clothes and then they won't end up in landfill. So there was a kind of really nice synergy there, and I appreciate, whilst they're not the most glamorous or prestigious brands, their kind of credibility in that sort of sustainable space, and Reckitt's as a whole are doing some amazing work. So yeah, so it's been quite a sort of a powerful journey. And I think for me, working on the Marie Claire resale edit, I think really exposed me to the damage that fashion does, both to the environment and to individuals. And then the scale of sort of the Boohoo's and the Sheins, and the fact that we make it a consumer's problem rather than
exactly
a fast fashion
yeah.
brand problem. So and there's all the surveys tell us, don't they, that the Gen Zs are the ones. There was a Razorfish and Vice piece of research that came out that said 82% insist that they want to consume products that sort of have purpose and are socially and ethically responsible. But then equally there's 26 million of them shopping on ASOS as we speak. So it sort of opened my eyes to kind of where almost where I'd love to play, really. And as I said, I know I play across lots of different sectors, but I feel that fashion needs my help.
Yeah, it's really a big chunk of the problem, and actions speak louder than words. And so the Tasha eBay collaboration is really, really impactful without even them mentioning it. Like, people are talking about it. They are saying, they are mentioning sustainability, and even the fact that she has a superpower and she's embracing in it. It's going to empower young women, and it's only positives in that sense. Maybe more impactful sometimes than a massive ESG report that only people who are already aware of the climate crisis are going to read.
Completely. But suddenly she's making it cool, to be to kind of be in that sort of pre-loved space. And I love the fact that they positioned it a luxury, because everything starts with luxury and then sort of trickles down to sort of the sort of more mainstream. So I think it has real potential power. And kind of pre-loved is really on trend right now, and she's queen of sort of pre-loved. So let's see what happens.
eBay must be more cheaper too for these young women who go on these fast fashion platforms. Mainly it's because they only have pocket money, if they're 14 years old and they want to look trendy. They can't always afford a £70 dress, for example, that is more sustainable, or 700. Absolutely. So yeah, we need to also understand the customer. Even if they have good intentions, if they can't afford it, there are alternatives like eBay that make it more they democratize sustainability,
They
basically.
do. You're
They've been
absolutely
doing it
right.
for years. They didn't have to reinvent themselves
And
in
actually,
that sense.
there are some major kind of, social constructs at play here, which are, the need for young women to present themselves in a
Mm,
very stylish, fashionable way, and so that kind of, conflict of wanting to do the right thing, and not buy fast fashion, but sort of really, this the social dictates demand that you look good. So I guess eBay almost gives them a way to kind of, still deliver on sort of those sort of social demands, but doing it in a way that is less harmful to the planet.
mm, mm, mm. And so, on a more personal side of things, I like asking people what's their climate story. How do you think it was through Marie Claire that you gained awareness about the climate crisis, or was it completely different?
I think so. I think definitely Marie Claire, definitely. It's been a brand, as I said, that's always been that intersection of sustainability, well, sort of climate change and gender equality. And I think we started to, I think when you work on a brand like Marie Claire, you are involved in that brand, you kind of live and breathe it, and that's why that brand was able to do or is able to do so much, because the people on it are behind, you drink the Kool-Aid effectively. So we were doing a lot of interesting stuff on Marie Claire, and actually we had started, we understood that there was a conscious consuming sort of aspect coming through. It was coming a little bit through the fashion industry, and certainly at a luxury level, but it was definitely a consumer kind of conversation. And we were like, okay, so we need to be where our consumers are. So we started really sort of exploring how we as a platform could help. We weren't pretending to be a sustainable brand. We hadn't gone under the bonnet, and we weren't looking at our carbon footprint, but we were talking about it from the point of view, we have a platform, we have scale, we are authoritative, we are credible. So how can we use that to, sort of almost further the cause? And then we'd worked on some great campaigns, things like Greater When We're Equal, Future Shapers, Womankind. We worked with organizations like UN, Amnesty International, Princeton Business Trust, the Forces Society, which was all about sort of helping to drive change. So you can't help but be personally influenced by that when you're working with kind of such amazing brands and amazing people. And then, as I said, the narrative started to evolve into a more sort of conscious consuming, sustainable narrative. And we launched a campaign in about 2017 called Start Somewhere. It was, beautifully done. It was at Claridge's. They are very ethical in how they host their events, which again lent itself brilliantly to the campaign. And bear in mind, 2017, it's a long time ago now. A lot has changed, but it was it was slightly ahead of itself. We worked with an environmental artist and activist called Anna Di Cambuccio, and she came and gave this amazing talk. And I remember someone in the audience asking a question that was that was almost, what's the point, if China are going to kind of continue to emit? And it was like, well, actually, it's all about the individual collective actions of millions of us will make change. So the campaign was really, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. And we were there to kind of almost help you navigate what you could do, what was within your remit to do. So I think that was probably a start point. Then there's an amazing woman called Sarah Vaughan, who is a change maker. She kind of consults in this space, but she came on board as our Chief Purpose and Sustainability Officer. And so she helped us to kind of start to almost define sort of and put some focus to kind of a sustainability strategy, and introduce it to the brands that were already, almost leading kind of conversations on climate change. So the likes of the L'Oreals and the Garnier and the Reckitt's and the Unilevers and, One Young World and Plastics for Change, etc. And, by collaborating, which is absolutely key, we were able to kind of really I think really start to make some impact. And I wouldn't say make a difference, because it's hard to quantify, except for the level of engagement we were getting on our platforms around the content. And then we created a business ecosystem that was sustainability. And in fact, it recently won a BSME award, innovation award. And so,
Oh, nice.
really
Amazing.
proud of the part I played in that, obviously alongside some very brilliant, talented people. And I think when I was leaving Marie Claire, that sort of almost had set the tone, and it was no longer about, a really nice, lovely, fat, juicy publishing salary, but actually, what matters now is kind of the brands I work with and that they kind of connect with my own value system. And I think actually that value system probably comes from, I sort of brought up, in a sort of slightly faith-orientated household. My mother was just, always out helping and supporting people. And I think that I've always supported the underdog. And I don't know where that comes from, but literally I'm drawn to people who are suffering or struggling in a way that's, I think I was always, the trade unionist at sort of, various companies I've worked for, because I've always wanted to fight for people's rights. And I think, the planet needs a bit of, the planet is the underdog right now. So I think that's where the sustainability journey comes from. And then I have a child, and I, like so many people, what I feel guilt that I've created a child that is inheriting, like, what kind of planet, the systems are breaking down, and anarchy is what he's going to inherit. And I feel desperately sad about that.
Yeah. So what gives you hope? Because
Yes, gosh,
let's not stay on a sad note.
Let's not.
There's so much going on, and there must be some hope when I see all these people like you taking action. Like I want to acknowledge the fact that what you are doing is already so much, and you're not the only one either. So all these people adding their efforts together, we can really make a difference. There's no small thing, and I really believe that climate change isn't a scientific problem or a engineer's problem. It's a people's problem.
Yes.
And whether your thing is communication, music, retail, anything, whatever you do, you need to transpose it to climate, and just reorient your skills to more purpose and contribute to our transition. But I'm speaking too much. What's your what gives you hope?
I agree with all of that, actually, and I think you're right that sort of whatever role you're in terms of an individual, a professional, a citizen, whatever that might be, I think it's you have the power to take action. And I think that was such a strong message behind the Cambridge course, and Cambridge is interesting, isn't it, because it's this sort of elite university, yet it's opened its doors to anyone and everyone through the sort of the CISL program. And the reason for that is that this can't be the best kept secret. This has to be everyone coming on board and understanding how they can play their part. And that doesn't mean switching into sustainability. That just means taking that information back into your workplace, back into your home life, back into your communities, and seeing how you can start to make a difference through understanding what those levers for change are. So I think things like that give me hope. I think headlines actually give me hope. So interestingly enough, for our Clean Power campaign, we were actually bumped off the front pages of press because there were these hugely dramatic pictures of a scorched Britain, which is, because of a climate-induced heat wave. And I think there's definitely a perspective that the media hasn't been behind the climate change messaging. It hasn't done what it can do, which is call for action. And it's now starting to do that. So, that kind of fills me with hope, and also the outrage at the gargantuan fossil fuel profits. I was listening to the Today program this morning, and they were talking to or talking about water companies and sort of the outrage of, certain areas of the UK have been without water for 5 days, and there's the number of leaks in the system and how water companies aren't being held to account, yet they are still paying their huge dividends to their shareholders and to their CEOs. And so I think that it's a time of reckoning. I think that's really powerful. I think the recent, I don't know if you've seen it, but the Enough is Enough campaign, which has been sparked by the cost of living crisis, and sort of saying to governments, no, enough is enough. Stop blaming, stop blaming the workers. It's time for policy and legislation to kind of deliver change. So I think that fills me with a lot of hope. And as you said, so many amazing individuals and networks that kind of are really looking to, almost taking on the sort of individual responsibility to see what kind of they can do. And that whole idea of collaborating and supporting and, kind of helping people along the journey too, I think is really powerful. So I think sort of the fact that the headlines, it feels like media has caught up, and media is so powerful that it can only bring about some positive, powerful change.
Yeah, that's very a positive message. More unity from the people to drive change. Yes. And more support from the media. It's only getting started. There's still a lot to do in terms of support from the media, but I think we will get there. We will get there, and once it's really getting started, it's the hardest part, really. Usually the next day it can be like very overwhelming and accelerated.
And then also, I mean, that the headlines again around the US climate bill, that I don't think we necessarily understand almost the impact that's going to have globally. That is a real, I think, pivotal moment too. So maybe now is a really exciting time. Maybe now kind of we've all caught up with the job that needs to be done.
Like every revolution, I think change is exciting if you decide to embrace it. That's the thing, really. Make people embrace the change and be active in that change to avoid the worst, especially when it comes to climate. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your professional, personal story and climate journey with us. If people want to follow you, where's the best place? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, I think, is the channel that I use, or the platform, should I say, that I use the most. I'm not so much on Instagram these days, although there's obviously a lot of great stuff happening there, but LinkedIn is probably where you find me.
And if people want to learn more about the campaign, they can visit cleanpower.eco or togetherband.org, right?
Yes. Great. But cleanpower.eco is probably your direct route, and you'll find everything you need to know about the campaign, its goals. We'll be updating it as we progress. So once we have kind of the numbers around, businesses transitioning, there's also a couple of other things which are, as an individual, as a consumer, you can get involved. Obviously, we can't switch because, let's not even go there. That's a whole other interview. But what you can do is you can buy a piece of the artwork, a digital piece of the artwork, and it's not an NFT. Must stress that. And that £3 for the cost of that artwork will go towards community projects, so community solar on rooftops in London, and planting trees in London. And again, that's kind of new initiatives rather than adding to initiatives that already exist. So there is a way for everyone to kind of get involved. And again, we'll be reporting on how we progress with our solar investments and our tree investments too.
Amazing. And the piece of art is really beautiful, so I really encourage people to have a look.
It's very uplifting, very uplifting. It is all about joy, which is kind of
exactly we need that. We
do. This is very positive, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Angela, and I'll see you again soon.
Yes, you will.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Have a lovely day. Thanks, Chantal. Bye-bye.